Documentaries are about the people that you meet and the stories you can tell. Stories of tragedy, laughter, hope and desperation. Across faraway lands or right here in your own backyard. This podcast brings these stories to you, the listener, so that you can experience the adventures of documentary filmmaking in audio form while embarking on daily adventures of your own. Welcome to Barefoot Media's Stories Within Stories podcast with your host, Simon Holland. Today we have on the show the man, the myth, the legend, Ron Elliott. Ron was the beating heart of Australian kids' TV shows in the 90s, working as a writer and director on a string of iconic shows such as Bush Patrol, Parallax and the almighty Ship to Shore. Ron has taught a generation of film students in Western Australia and is now working hard as a novelist on his own material. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Ron Elliott.
Hi Simon, on a hot afternoon.
40 degrees today in Perth. And it's going to be relentless summer, I think they're saying something like that. So good indoors writing weather, bad filmmaking weather, I think. Yeah. Big hats. Yeah, exactly right. Well, you're somewhat of a dream guest for me because I think you inspired a lot of, basically a whole generation of filmmakers here in Western Australia. Just the work that you're doing at a critical point in culture, in Australian culture. And in some respects, the shows that you worked on and the shows that you wrote really formulated a model for childhood, and that's the last time that childhood existed. So would you just tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and why kids shows specifically?
Okay, well, it's a long story that started back in Perth, and then I became an ABC director via editing in the mailroom and all those old things and degrees and yeah, I took a chance, went through a door, and I kind of been doing it ever since, going through doors that open. As luckily for me, as one closes behind my heels, I'm going through another one. But writing for kids TV was kind of barren entertainment, really. He was doing that in Perth as I arrived back in Perth to have children of my own. And I was still a director writing I was writing great feature films that never got made every summer. One of my rules was always I had to get some funding. So I always had to get some funding to write the next draft of the great, awful, dystopian West Australian film and international film and all the genres. And at the same time, directing a lot of corporate stuff and barren films and directing. My first gig, good gig here, was directing a show called Ship to Shore, which was a great, hilarious show to work on and to be part of that first series, and that naughtiness was fantastic. And at that same time, I kind of was still directing. I was still doing corporate stuff, but slowly more work started to come out that was children's drama. And it wasn't just the ABC that was seeking to open that. There are a whole, and I might bore you later with kind of Section C and all the government bullshit. That was quite important. Yeah. But at that time, there was a rule that we should make more TV for children. And having come from the ABC, where I already had that kind of, I had been offered money, especially in Sydney, to go and do, some big shows for a lot of money. And I was like still working for the ABC because I wanted to make a difference, I believed. Yeah. And luckily for me, it was the last great days of the ABC as a public institution. So I think I have to say something to you, and which I have been saying to my students and my young peers. I came through free education. Yeah. I did 2 degrees for nothing at the same time because it didn't cost me anything. I just learned. And then I came to the ABC and the moment I landed, they went, let's make more directors. We'll send you to Melbourne. Like, and you just did an audition, like you had to qualify.
Yeah.
And they went, you can go to Melbourne and play on all these things and we'll see if we think you're going to be an ABC director. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, suddenly I did some time in Tassie and I did an Anzac Day here and a few things, but suddenly I'm working with the geniuses of the Gillies Report and Australia Standing in it. And like I'm in the room with Percy Penguin pissing next to me in the urinal. You know, it's like, it's insane. It's like your dream. You know, you're sitting in the chair going, yes, Ron, what would you like? Oh, well, I'll have a purple elephant. I'll have, you know, like it's crazy to think about and fantastic. So I did all those things and I'm still on your question, by the way. It was time to have kids of my own. I was living in Sydney, working really hard, crazy hours, you know, in ABC drama and not sleeping and went, I don't want to bring up kids in Sydney. I'm going back to Perth.
Yeah.
And guess what? There's so much sunshine. It's going to be the new Hollywood.
Jeez, just heard that recently.
Oh, yeah. Just build another sound studio and they will come.
Yeah. Well, that's how we ended up with this studio in Freo because of that exact thing. But it's great. So you've been in the industry so long, you've seen a lot of things recycled and ideas. Has it always felt the same? You know, you're struggling, you're doing things for cheap or free, just trying to take a shot like at a home run swing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have always kind of, and I kind of preach it as well. I think if we do, I do this because I love it. Right? I just love it. I love telling stories. I'm just always want to tell stories. What I've been lucky is my big luck is being born at the right time where I've been able to make a living by telling stories. Yeah. And so, and it's always not been a great living. I've made corporate documentaries about decanting LPG gas, which I made really well. I want to and stuff that you put in ceilings and done some. And by the way, also did some really challenging, wonderful education docos. You know, those corporate docos that went out of fashion and are now back into fashion, fortunately. Yeah. You know, because the kids deserve to be getting the best.
Yeah.
So, I just feel like I've been really lucky, but I've always had at least 2 or 3 strings to the bow.
Yeah.
You know, I've known that I needed, then I had children when I got here and having kids as a freelance filmmaker has kind of become scary periodically, you know, like I did all those shows for Paul Barron and Taylor Media and a couple of other companies that were here. And I moved over from directing to writing kids stuff full time because it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And you could break the rules and nutsy things like Germany would say we want more sunshine and Britain would say we don't. Like it's just like, oh, okay. Like, but what started to happen is my girls grew up. And so I was writing for them and I was writing them into the shows. So as well as like being able to break so many boundaries and enter so many magical worlds, like crazy great worlds like Parallax, Ship to Shore. But even Bush Patrol was fun. You know, it's like being up in and both of those shows, Ship to Shore and Bush Patrol, I got gigs as directors and then I just started to fall out of love with directing somehow. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the feature film. Like I was just working my guts out for 2 years for 50 grand and not having been able to pay the rent and going, this was my dream. Like, what the hell?
Why isn't this working out?
Yeah, why isn't this fun?
Yeah.
And so I think I just started to head more towards writing for TV. Yeah. And again, just gifted by producers who just kept giving me work. Like I've never had an agent my whole life. Isn't that nuts? I need one now, by the way. So now that I'm old, I'm old, folks. Now that I'm old, I really need one. And it's like all the phones
social
just stop
media
ringing.
manager, you need all that stuff.
All that stuff. Oh, you need to have this. You need to have that. It's like,
yeah. Isn't it funny how everything comes back to writing? Like, I think I went really quickly up the scale going, I'm a director. And then you go, well, you got to write well. And then I went to writing and I'm like, well, if I'm going to get people on board, I want to be a producer. So I went straight up that. And then I went, wait, the funnest and freest bit is writing, because COVID broke out. Yeah. And then that's when you can sit at home and you can do it. And then you go, if you're going to have a family, this is the way to do it. If you're going to travel the world and see things and live your life, you need to be able to write and write well in any type of format as well. Yeah. Did you find that when you were out of love with directing, because of the stresses and all of that sort of stuff, when you came out to writing, did it feel refreshing? How did you feel?
There was a kind of another crossover. So I was writing every Christmas when the corporate world went quiet, or writing when suddenly the feature film or the TV shows delayed for six weeks. Oh yeah, okay. Well, so I think I've been writing my whole life. And so directing was just storytelling. And the other thing that happened with that is I've always loved actors. Yeah. I always had such a great time work. So I'm going to be metaphorical now and go orchestra, because, you write, but you're writing for performance, or you're writing for vision, and then it's like writing when you direct anything, but especially a documentary, where you bring in hours and hours and hours of marble, I like to say now, marble, and then you have to sculpt the marble back to marble. Yeah. And then you have to make, then you have to edit. So I also think starting off as an editor has just so helped me. So being an editor and a writer and then falling in love with actors was just everything was at the same. We're at different paces. Yeah. But that fact that you're working with so many other gifted musicians, it just brings it out. So it was a long time before I directed anything I wrote. I'd give my stuff to other people to direct, and so those things were all useful.
When you're talking about a symphony, I just think of how everything must have come together for something like Ship to Shore. How iconic that was for us in our family. That was the anthem of coming home from school. Yeah. As soon as that came on, you're going to hang out with those kids. You're going to be free. And we're the same age as them, So you gather all the kids in the neighbourhood, you go on an adventure in Bibra Lake or something, So that was my life growing up too, out in the wilds of Embleton, where there was 3 houses and sand quarries, no supermarket. I think a Bones and a drive-in. That was, you just went. Yeah, early days. And so what came together with that show? What was it like being on set? Those young, talented actors. It really was the cream of the crop at the time.
It was. I think the casting director was really good. I think Paul Barron had done a lot of work getting up to that. I think the Rapsy brothers sound like a group, don't they? So different. Yeah. They had been working for a long time, but they came up with this. It was Gilligan's Island, man. Yeah. And it was Gilligan's Island. Yeah. And it was great. And then moving over to writing was there was a really gifted script producer from over east who really nurtured the show and gave people a lot of room. So my first go was like a fishing story in series. Might have been series 2. I had to audition as a writer. Even though I was directing, I had to audition, and I just wrote about being a kid fishing and all the goop and all the and the gift of the characters having their own slots. Yeah. So Kelvin going, okay, let's just start storytelling again for me as a writer.